It's a nice morning. And I'm going to show you something very sad. Right there across the street, my neighbor's driveway. See that? It's the U-Haul. Their truck is missing, so I'm assuming they probably went out to go get some breakfast. And they're moving. So a few days ago, let's see, must have been Tuesday, no, Monday, the moving van came in, packed all their belongings, but they had to save some of their belongings as far as maybe like mattresses and lamps and televisions, things like that, to put into this U-Haul, because they're leaving today. They're moving to Florida, and they'll get there tomorrow, so they'll be there Thursday. But their moving van's not coming till sometime next week, which is really strange. Usually when you move, the moving van will be there the day that you're moving in or the following day. So they have to have some things, like towels, and they have to have mattresses to sleep on, and some chairs, and things like that. It's a little bit of a sad morning. Pete and Sue, they were very good neighbors. I hate to see them go, but they have their new adventure down in the Tampa area. Pete has a job down there, so anyway, I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a bit. Hi friends, I want to talk to you today about moving and about neighbors. And because my neighbors across the street, they're moving, their names are Pete and Sue. And they have been very, very good neighbors. I'm really going to miss them. I started getting a little choked up yesterday, seeing they were in their final phase of leaving. The mover truck came on Monday and packed everything up. And so yesterday they were loading up their little U-Haul that they're taking. And so it really hit, home. Oh, they're leaving, they're going to Florida, and I wish them well. But I do want to say that they were very good neighbors, and you don't often find good neighbors. So I thought that I would tell you about some of my old neighbors, because Harry and I, we've moved about 4 different times since we've been married, and you have good neighbors, and then you have neighbors that are not so good, and neighbors that, you just keep peace with, and everything's just fine. You see them out and about and you wave hi to them, and that's probably about it, But when we lived in Ohio, now the house that we lived in, Harry's parents had that house built, and they only lived in it for, I don't know, maybe 10 years, and then they went to Detroit, and then they were there for several years, and then they went to Houston. But Harry wanted to stay there at the house, and so his parents kept the house because they thought maybe when they would retire, they would come back there, and their house, they would have their old house again and be paid for, and all of that other sort of thing. And so anyway, when we got married and I had to, get to know everybody, the next door neighbors, they were really, really nice, on both sides of us, actually. And the one neighbor on the one side, they had a little Cocker Spaniel, and we had a Dalmatian, and our dogs actually played together. But it was funny that my dog could go out, and Shadow, that was a Cocker Spaniel, he would play with my dog Gabriel. They got along really well. But if I went outside anywhere near Shadow, I couldn't even pet him. He'd always growl at me and try to bite me. But our neighbors were very, very nice. The people on the other side of them were nice too. They were the ones, I really didn't know them really well. They were neighbors that I just waved at all the time, and they waved at me, and, we'd say hello, but, we just never went to go visit each other. Right across the street from us was an old couple, and they were really, really mean for whatever reason. They were really mean. And it was probably about a year before we moved. The guy was outside doing some yard work, and I was outside doing some yard work, and he actually came over and started to talk to me. The thing was, his wife died. And I think it was his wife. She was the one that was really she was mean. She just didn't like people, I don't think. And I'm sure because of his wife passing, he was lonely, and he came over and talked to me and was just as nice as could be. And for about then that last year that we were there at our house after his wife Mary had died, when we'd see each other, and even Harry, if we were outside, we'd go talk to him and he'd talk to us. So it was really his wife that was in the way. Now, next to them on this side, there was a family, and they had 2 daughters, but the husband and the wife divorced, and it was just the girls. But by the time that Harry and I got married, the girls were already in their teenage years, and so we were there for, their last several years of high school, and they had parties all the time. And those kids that would come to the parties, they would throw their beer bottles in our yard, they'd throw up in our yard, they'd even come to the side of our house to throw up, and it was really sick. And we'd have to have talks with the mother, but her name is Carol, she didn't care. Yeah, so, you had those kind of neighbors. On this side of us, those neighbors were really nice too. We really liked them. They had a built-in swimming pool, and while they were at work, they'd just tell us, if you want to go swimming, Sandy, just go over, So I'd go over. Sometimes the other neighbors would be there, and they were really nice. And on the other side of them was an older couple named Maggie and Andy, and they were really nice people. I'd go over and I'd just talk to them because they were just so nice, and just fun to talk to. And then a highway patrolman moved across the street next to that Carol and her teenage daughters. And when the highway patrolman moved there, their party slowed down a little bit, so that was actually kind of nice. So, we got along with everybody in that neighborhood. That was a nice neighborhood. We knew a lot of our neighbors. I mean, even other ones, we knew a lot of our neighbors, and everything was, fine. So when we went to Virginia, obviously we're moving to a state that we know not a soul there, except Harry had an aunt and uncle that lived there about 20 minutes away from where we moved in. But, we don't have no family there. All of our friends obviously are in Ohio, and we had to make new friends, and it was quite easy. The neighbors right next door to us, we lived in a cul-de-sac, and so we were the second from the end, and the neighbors right at the end there, they were from Minnesota originally, and I think she had gone to Liberty University, and she liked Virginia so much that when her and her husband were married, they left Minnesota then to come to Virginia. And so that's how they ended up there. And then here we were next door to them. They'd only been there for a couple years. And because they had no family in the state, we had no family, you kind of glob on to people like that. And plus they had little kids that were my kids' age that helped too. And we had a nice little bond. We were like family with each other. Our neighbors across the street, except the one house on the end, we really didn't talk to those folks too much, but then this person here, we ended up talking to them. Our next door neighbors on the other side, it was a younger couple, then they sold it, and then this other family bought it, and then they weren't there very long, and then another young couple bought it probably about the last year that we were there. So there were several neighbors in and out of that house next to us. But down the street, over on the other side, our neighborhood was only 2 streets, and they were both ended in cul-de-sacs. But we knew all the neighbors almost down that way because I was out walking all the time. And, you'd stop and talk to people, and the neighbors up the street, got to know them. And everything was fine. Everything was fine until about the last, I don't even want to say the last, well, maybe the last year, probably. We moved the summer of 96. It started probably about the summer of 95. One of our newer neighbors that have only been there probably for a year, 2 years, that moved on this other street. The guy worked with Harry, and he, along with some other people, they were starting to try to get Harry in trouble. They were jealous of him because with Harry's business, what he does and all of that, being out and about, it's all the nuclear industry. Harry's very good at what he does, and he's a perfectionist, and he's very personable, and so people really liked him when they went out on these jobs. As a matter of fact, where Harry, he didn't move up in that company because we left that company to go to Chicago to another company, and when we went there, it was a higher position, like in management, over even these other guys that were at his old company. You follow along with that. And then when we went to Chicago, Harry moved up the ladder even several times. So when Harry would even go out on some of the jobs for the inspections of the nuclear plants and that, and they would contract out the old company that Harry worked for, Harry was way up over all of these people. And so, see, that's what it was before we had moved and that happened. Harry was just very liked, and when they'd go out on these jobs, and these other people saw that Harry was liked, and they became jealous of him. So when they were off of jobs and they were just working at their home office and that, they were doing things to just cause trouble for him, trying to get him in trouble and everything. And so this one neighbor who, they were so glad to move into our neighborhood because, again, they had left out of their state. They were from PA, actually. They, needing to make friends and all of that sort of thing. And, we latched on to them, as family, because that's what, we've done even with other neighbors. And, I introduced these folks to all of our other neighbors, and everything was fine for about the first year and a half that they were there, and then all the trouble started with the whole work situation. And I had talked to the wife because she would walk with us, and I would tell her, why don't you say something to your husband, this is really what's going on, and, because Harry's liked, he can't help that, why are they causing trouble for him in all of this? And, she never talked to me about it again after that. But the trouble continued, and Harry would come home from work. He would just be totally stressed out because of the stuff that they were doing and everything. It really caused a lot of stress for him. And after that, it's like, I just didn't want anything to do with that neighbor, anymore. If she was out walking with the other ladies, I'd see it, I wouldn't join them. I'd just go out later and walk by myself. Or maybe my next door neighbor, she would walk with me, and I had let her know what was going on and everything. And I just, I know you can't really control your husband and what your husband does, but, I expected, a little cooperation because we were very good to them. Their boys, they played with my boys. They were the same age, and they were over at my house all the time. And, we were kind of just really saddened the dissolve of that whole friendship and everything. And so seriously, for about the last year that we lived there, you had to remove yourself. It's not, anything to do with, we were angry at them and holding unforgiveness. No, none of that. It was just, for Harry's sake, we had to distance ourselves from those folks. And so other than that, our neighbors in Virginia, they were wonderful neighbors, and we really liked them, except for some of the neighbors, being diehard Southerners, and we were Yankees that moved to the neighborhood, and they'd say things like, Yankee, go home, and what are you doing here? But that's when we first moved there, But over time, you get to to know these folks and they get to see you for who you really are, and they stop saying that sort of thing. But so actually we had really good neighbors there. So we had great neighbors in Ohio. We had great neighbors in Virginia, except in Ohio for the girls across the street with their parties, and for this last year that we lived in Virginia for that neighbor, her husband causing problems and that. Other than those things, we had really great neighbors and we loved our neighborhoods. Then we moved to Illinois, and our house was in a new subdivision. So even the whole time that we were there, they were still building houses, believe it or not. In 11 years, they were still building houses. And on my street, our block, from our side and then the back side, so that whole block, and then on this side here, the two end sides here, there was seriously probably only 5 or 6 houses, ours being one of them. So you had all these vacant lots and stuff. And when you're moving to a new neighborhood like that, you're going to get somebody that's going to be the queen bee. That's what I used to call my neighbor. Her name was Sean. I called her the queen bee. Because she was the one that, she thought, she was the queen of the neighborhood. So queen bee. And all her little other bees, in her little hive, her little clique. And then as neighbors started to build houses and stuff, of course, there she was, and kind of roping everybody into her agenda and her thing, and pretty basically let everybody know, she was the queen bee of the block, in her certain way and that sort of thing. And that neighborhood, well, let me just say this. The neighbors on the right side of us, John and Gina, they were excellent. We really liked them. And a couple of the other neighbors on the block, they were really nice. When they started building across the street, right across the street from us, there were 2 houses, great neighbors there. And then up the street, those 3 houses up that way, those neighbors were great. We got along with them. The one neighbor, they used to have Christmas parties every year. We'd go there. She put on the best Christmas parties. And she was my inspiration for all the over-the-top Christmas decorating, because I just did regular Christmas decorating, but she went like all out for Christmas decorating. That's where I got my Christmas decorating bug from her. And we decorated for all the holidays, fall holidays and things like that too. But those neighbors were really great. We really liked them. And then we knew other neighbors up on the other block and this way and that sort of thing. You get to know people. But then there were the other neighbors that they just caused you problems, and the neighbors on the left side of us, they were horrid. So many horrible stories I could tell you about them, but yeah, they moved, I think right after we did. When we put our house on the market, they ended up putting their house on the market, but I think our house sold, because Harry's company bought it, so we were able to leave and they were still there. But yeah, I could tell you all kinds of stories about those next door neighbors, which would just be like a whole video in itself. And then when we came here because we had problems of all the neighborhoods now, Ohio, Virginia, and Illinois. Our Illinois neighbors, except for the few of them that we got along with really well, all the other ones around us, you see, they were in the hive of Sean. They were in Sean's hive because she was the queen bee, you see. In other words, this is the one neighbor that's a little bit snooty, that thinks that she's better than everybody else, and she has her home interior parties and all this, and so she ropes everybody in and, see, I'm Miss Wonderful and like me. And then, people like that, and they put on a front to people, and other people think that they're so fabulous and so wonderful and all this sort of thing. And so as houses were being built in the neighborhood, and she was getting to know people, she grafted all the other little bees in the beehive in her hive. Except I never got grafted into her hive, because I saw what she was, for who she was, And anyway, so there was other bees in the neighborhood also that wouldn't get grafted into her little hive there and be under her little snooty control. And neighbors usually like that. They gossip. They constantly gossip. And that's what she did. She was the neighbor that constantly gossiped with all the other neighbors. And of course, she told her story her way. And she would do it in such a way that she'd get these neighbors to believe all these things. So anyway, that could be another topic for another time that we'll just talk about bad neighbors. This one's about good neighbors, really. But I could do a whole video about bad neighbors between the queen bee of the neighborhood and the neighbors to the left of us. Seriously, I could probably do a couple videos on them alone. But Illinois, it was good and bad, mostly bad neighborhood, bad neighbors in that neighborhood, because they were all under, the queen bee's control, So when we moved here, our next door neighbors, they came over, introduced themselves. They were so friendly. Pete and Sue, who were moving across the street, they came over, introduced themselves. The other neighbor right over there, behind Pete and Sue, but their house faces the road. They came over, really nice, very friendly. But I had to tell them straight up front. I said, in Chicago, we had some bad experiences with neighbors, We're getting to know you, and you seem to be very nice and everything, but I'm just going to be upfront with you and let you know that I don't gossip, and I don't want to be part of any gossip. I mean, I don't want people coming to me to gossip to me or any of that sort of thing. And the one neighbor stopped me and she said, "Oh, don't worry about that, Sandy. Yeah, we don't do that here." But they do it on the other side of the street, because our street goes in a big horseshoe. She said on the other side of the street, they do that over there, but we don't do that here. And I said, well, that's good. And I said, and the other thing is, you're probably not going to see me out and about too much. I mean, you'll see me in the yard, and when you're out and stuff, I'll talk to you. And if you're driving by, I'll wave at you and all of this sort of thing, because I want to get along with my neighbors. But I'm probably not going to be so interactive with you guys. And it's nothing against you, but it's coming from the neighborhood that we just left with those neighbors. We had some very bad experiences, and I don't want that with my neighbors. I want to be at peace with my neighbors. I want to get along with my neighbors. If I need to borrow something from you, and if I came over and asked you, can I borrow a cup of sugar? I would want you to say, sure, Sandy, here. If you need to borrow a cup of sugar, come over. I'm more than happy to give it to you. Matter of fact, you don't even have to bring the sugar back. There's no borrowing. If you need a cup of sugar, you just come and say, can I have a cup of sugar? I'll just give it to you. I don't do this borrowing thing. I want to get along with my neighbors. And I have to say that all of our neighbors here, we've gotten along with them. They're wonderful. We even met Farmer Tom. I talked to you guys about Farmer Tom, the old gentleman that lives in the historic house across the street, big farm that he has over there. And they're just wonderful people. But one thing I told Pete and Sue, Harry and I went to say goodbye to them on Monday when the moving truck was over, because we thought they were leaving the next day. And, before I hug Sue goodbye, I'm going to get choked up, because they really were good neighbors. I hate seeing them go, but I just told her, I said, remember I told you, Sue, when you first moved in, that you wouldn't see me out and about that much? And she goes, oh yeah, I remember. And I said, we saw each other enough that we had a nice friendship. I wish it could have been a little bit more, because now I look back on it, I wish it could have been a little bit more, because they were very nice neighbors. I wish I would have been a little bit more assertive with my neighbors, and that sort of thing. And so now it's put me in a position that I want to try. I'm on good terms with all my neighbors. I want it to stay that way. But then again, I think maybe I should just keep doing what I'm doing, because you don't want to get involved in any kind of gossip. You learn something about a neighbor, and I just don't want no trouble. That's why I've kind of kept to myself. So I'm not a hermit where I don't go out and talk to my neighbors. I do talk to my neighbors. It's just that, we're just not going over and chit-chatting a lot with each other. You know what I mean? So anyway, in that respect, it makes me think I don't want to be so assertive to get out there a little bit more, because I think that's where you run into trouble. Maybe that's why, everything's been wonderful for this last 10 years, because we give everybody their space and we want them to give us our space. You know what I mean? And I think that actually works. Our next door neighbors, we get along with them just fine. Everything's fine. So I don't know. Now, who bought the house, believe it or not, my son Brian, he's 24. He'll be 25 in November. One of his friends that actually graduated a year before him, he bought the house. Or actually, he said his father bought the house for him. I guess his father is like a gazillionaire, A lot of Brian's friends, a lot of people in this area, surprisingly, they own companies and businesses, and we've never known it. A lot of people around here are pretty wealthy. But anyway, I guess his dad bought this house for him, and his girlfriend's expecting a baby and all of that. So they'll be moving in here probably within the next day or two. But anyway, I came over and I said, Brian, do you know, and I gave the kid's name. He goes, yeah. He goes, I'm over his house all the time. He just sold his house. I said, yeah, because he bought this one. He goes, oh, that's the one that he bought? Because he knew his friend sold his house, but he didn't know where, he was moving to. So all of a sudden he got his phone out and he goes, I'm going to text him. So he knows this kid. And so anyway, those are our new neighbors. And what's really nice, the father has a business. I don't know how much construction stuff that they do, but I know that they do flooring, and they're contracted out even through Home Depot. So he's got a lot of contract with jobs with them. Anyway, they do the flooring and stuff. So I'm going to see if I can get them to come over and check my floors out, because that wax stuff that I put on my kitchen floors into the family room and how it's messed my floors all up. My floors need to be resanded and restained. So I'm gonna ask them after they get all moved in and settled in and everything, ask them if they'll come over and look at my floors and maybe give me an estimate. So that's nice to have that. So anyway, the whole purpose of this video, to talk about good neighbors, bad neighbors, mostly the good neighbors, is cherish those neighbors that you have. That are good to you, and that you get along with them, and savor those neighbors. Always try to stay in good relationships. I know sometimes in some neighborhoods, and I've seen it, I even saw it in Illinois, good neighbors, they're friendly with each other, and then all of a sudden they can have bad breakups. Sometimes because you can get a little bit too close to people, and too many barbecues with each other, and things, you get upset with this person over something, and it causes bad blood in the neighborhood too. And I've seen that happen. Matter of fact, the Queen Bee in Illinois, directly behind her, but up the street from us on the corners where that person lived, that was probably one of the first bees that she got in her beehive, and they were best buds for a few years, and then things went bad, and then the one neighbors, they even moved. So anyway, just crazy stuff can happen, even with neighbors that you think that you get along with really well. But my whole point is this, I just believe in being at peace with everybody that you meet, and get along with everybody. And if you see any kind of tension, that's when you kind of back off a little bit or whatever. But, the neighbors that you have that are good neighbors to you, cherish those neighbors, because, Pete and Sue, they moved in a year before us, so they've been here 11 years. We're going to be, in a few months, 10 years here, which is hard to believe. And like I said, we've got along really well, but I wish that we could have, we never had them over for a barbecue. They never had us over there. You know what I'm saying? Where our other neighborhoods, we had people over, because what happened in Illinois kept me from doing that here. So when I would see them, it was because, like, if she was out walking the dog, I was out in the yard or whatever, we'd go and we would talk, but we never asserted ourselves to, come over, we're going to grill some steaks and chicken. Come on over for dinner. We never did anything like that. And I wish that we would have, because they were really, really good neighbors. And I hate seeing them leave. I really do. I get choked up even thinking about it. So anyway, cherish your neighbors and be a good neighbor. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.